that MAGA liked?
A remarkable?
I'm talking about remarkable, that all of us can agree is a remarkable human being.
Steve Harvey.
Him?
I mean, he met with Donald
meeting
Trump.
with him. I'm talking about with MAGA champions, like a Tatum or like a fucking Byron Donalds or like those people. Name me a is Clarence Thomas remarkable?
Remarkable in certain ways.
Kanye's a remarkable man who they co-opted, but his experience, they glommed onto him. They kind of be attracted to each other. But even he says things they don't like.
Right.
What they don't.
I can't even imagine the misery of these bums. Just to not be good at what you do, not work hard in the world, but never robbed. Because why? I'm not pretending to be something I'm not. You think I'm a blood. You think I'm a Crip. I'm from Ohio. I'm a comedian. I'm a father.
Right.
I'm trying.
The brightest light bulb ever came on for me. That light bulb had never switched on better for me at nothing. Lincoln Electric, General Electric, carpet cleaning, rib joint, Amway products, Shackley products, Dick Gregory Bohemian Diet, A.L. Williams Insurance, Commonwealth Insurance. I had all these jobs.
Right.
The light bulb went off. I was born that night. And I went to work the next day and quit my job.
Listen carefully, because what you're about to hear isn't just another celebrity story. This is a story about loyalty, betrayal, and how the biggest laughs in the room can sometimes hide the deepest scars. This is about Steve Harvey, the man who built an empire out of jokes, charm, and that trademark smile, and the comedians who now claim they were left behind or stepped on during his rise to the top. From Katt Williams to Mark Curry, from Monique to Bernie Mac, and even D.L. Hughley and Cedric the Entertainer, voices that once stood beside him are now speaking up. And what they're saying is shaking the world of comedy all over again. So sit back, relax, and don't move a muscle, because this is one story that gets darker the deeper you go. It starts long before the Suits, the talk shows, and the Family Feud fame. Before Steve Harvey became the man with every answer, he was just another comedian hustling from club to club, chasing laughs in smoky rooms with bad lighting and small paychecks. Back then, the comedy scene was pure. It was about grind, respect, and the unspoken rule every real comic lived by. You never, ever steal another man's material. That rule was sacred. But somewhere along the way, the whispers began. Whispers that Steve had crossed that line more than once. Mark Curry was one of the first to speak out. You probably remember him from the hit show Hangin' with Mr. Cooper. He was smooth, funny, and real. But when Mark started talking about how his material somehow showed up on Steve Harvey's show, people didn't want to believe it. Mark said he'd seen his own jokes, word for word, played out on Steve's TV show like they were brand new. He said he recognized not just the jokes, but the rhythm, the delivery, even the little stories in between. To him, it wasn't inspiration, it was theft. Imagine spending years perfecting your art only to see it lifted, polished, and performed by someone who had more fame, more cameras, and a bigger platform. Mark didn't just accuse Steve. He said it broke his heart, because in comedy, stealing someone's joke isn't just a crime, it's a betrayal. But Mark wasn't the only one. Over time, more and more comedians began hinting at the same thing. Katt Williams, the firecracker of comedy, the man known for saying what everyone else is afraid to say, came out swinging. In one of his most explosive interviews, Katt didn't hold back. He called Steve Harvey the king of stealing jokes. He said Steve built his career by stepping over others, taking what didn't belong to him and selling it back to the world with a smile. Those weren't just words. They were a challenge. Katt Williams had nothing to lose, and that's what made his words sting even more. When he spoke, the whole room went quiet. You could feel the truth in the way he said it, like someone who had seen too much and had finally decided to stop playing nice. Now the story gets even deeper when you bring in Bernie Mac. Bernie wasn't just another comedian. He was a legend, raw, fearless, and loved by millions. When the original Kings of Comedy came out, it was supposed to be about unity. 4 comedians, Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, Cedric the Entertainer, and D.L. Hughley, all kings in their own right, sharing the same stage. It was history in the making. But behind the laughs, things weren't as perfect as they seemed. After Bernie's passing, old stories started resurfacing. People said Steve had tried to take Bernie's roles, tried to outshine him, even tried to use his connections to get Bernie replaced in certain projects. There was one story that still hurts fans to this day, that Steve allegedly called producers on Ocean's 11 and said he'd be a better fit than Bernie. Whether that's true or not, it planted a seed of doubt that never really went away. When Bernie Mac died, it felt like comedy lost its soul. But for some people, it also felt like Steve Harvey stepped into that spotlight too easily, too comfortably. He became the face of clean, family comedy, the man with all the answers, while Bernie's memory lived on through his fans. Katt Williams said it best. Bernie was the people's champion. Steve was Hollywood's champion. And those two things don't always mix. But Steve's issues weren't just with Katt or Bernie. Monique, another powerhouse in comedy, had her own painful story to tell. You remember the moment, that TV interview that broke the internet. Steve sat across from Monique and told her, plain as day, "You can't sacrifice money for integrity. This is the money game." Those words hit like a slap. Because to Monique, who had been fighting against being blackballed in Hollywood, it wasn't about money. It was about respect. She thought Steve, of all people, would understand. They both came from the same grind, the same struggle, but right there in front of the world, he made it clear he wasn't standing beside her. He was standing with the system that locked her out. And in that moment, millions of viewers saw a side of Steve Harvey that didn't match his motivational speeches or his Sunday sermons. It's easy to forget sometimes that before the fame, all these comedians were friends. They shared stages, shared meals, shared dreams. D.L. Hughley once said that back in the day, if one of them was struggling, they'd all pitch in to help. But over the years, something changed. The bigger Steve's name got, the smaller his circle seemed to become. Old friends turned into distant memories, and respect turned into resentment. Even DL, who rarely speaks out against his peers, dropped a subtle line that said it all. Steve knows how to survive in any room, but that don't mean everybody likes how he does it. You could feel the weight behind those words. He wasn't throwing shade, he was telling the truth. Because in Hollywood, survival sometimes comes at a price, and not everyone is willing to pay it the same way. Cedric the Entertainer, another one of the kings of comedy, has always played it cool. He doesn't dive into drama. But even Cedric couldn't avoid the whispers. When asked about Steve and the tension between the kings, Cedric said something interesting. We all had our moments. We all had our moves. But sometimes those moves hurt people you never meant to hurt. It was vague, but it spoke volumes. Everyone knew what he meant. Fame changes people. It changes friendships. It changes how you see loyalty. And once you start tasting that Hollywood success, it's hard to go back to being just one of the guys. Let's not forget Mark Curry's story because his words still echo today. He said Steve Harvey didn't just borrow jokes, he borrowed stories that came straight from Mark's life. There was one joke about Halloween that Mark swore was his. It wasn't just funny, it was personal. He'd told that story about his childhood for years, and then suddenly he saw Steve telling it on national TV as if it was his own. That kind of betrayal cuts deep. Because in comedy, your life is your material. Your struggles, your family, your pain. That's what makes your audience connect. So when someone takes that and uses it for profit, it's not just stealing a joke. It's stealing a piece of your soul. And Katt Williams, being Katt Williams, didn't stop there. He called out everything, from Steve's style to his stories. He said Steve wasn't even being real about his life. That story about being homeless, Katt said was a lie. He claimed that while Steve was supposedly homeless, he was actually getting paid thousands every week doing shows. He went as far as to say that Steve rewrote his past to make himself look like a self-made hero. And whether you believe Katt or not, you can't deny that his words made people think. Because the one thing Katt has always been known for is speaking without fear. And if he's calling you out, there's probably some truth hiding somewhere in the mix. Then there's the other side, the fans who still love Steve Harvey, who say all these call-outs are just jealousy. They say Steve earned everything he has. He worked hard, stayed consistent, and learned how to play the game better than anyone else. And maybe that's true. maybe the difference between Steve and the others isn't talent or integrity. Maybe it's strategy. Because one thing's for sure, Steve knows how to survive. He's turned himself into a brand that reaches beyond comedy, talk shows, books, family advice, faith, fashion, you name it. He's everywhere. And that kind of success doesn't come easy. But the real question is, what did it cost him? Even Steve himself once admitted, I've done things I ain't proud of, but when you're hungry, you eat what's in front of you. At the time, it sounded like he was just being real. But looking back now, it sounds more like a confession. Because if you listen to the stories, if you piece together all the little hints from people who knew him before the fame, a picture starts to form. One of a man who is willing to do whatever it took to make it. And in Hollywood, that kind of hunger can either make you a legend or a villain, depending on who's telling the story. It's easy to smile for the cameras and preach about faith, family, and forgiveness, but behind that polished image, there are cracks that keep showing. The affairs, the broken friendships, the accusations, they all point to a man who's been fighting battles we can't see. And maybe that's why this story hits so hard. Because it's not just about Steve Harvey the celebrity, it's about Steve Harvey the man. The man who had to choose between being loved and being successful. The man who wanted to win so bad, he might have forgotten what it means to play fair.
The Steve Harvey Morning Show. I'm at 112 markets. I got 9 million listeners. I'm controlled by FCC rules. The problem is, these people go get these podcasts who have no FCC rules to abide by. But you have to remember, even though you're on a podcast, you still got a brand.
Yeah.
And so you can't say what you want to say and expect to be relevant and not get canceled. You can't have a podcast, let somebody come on your show and talk about your friends.
I agree.
Okay, you got a podcast. Y'all got a guest on here. And he starts slamming Fred. He knows something about Fred, happened in the past, will lie or not, and just starts slamming Fred. Y'all got to shut that down.
Yeah.
Because this your brother. You got to protect him. And you got to protect the brand. They don't do that no more. So you come on my show, you spread all these lies about some people that I call my so-called friends, and I just let you sit there and check it. And because your podcast had so many views on that right there, your next guest is the same type of guest. Because now you want your money to be made off clicks and views at somebody's expense. Well, now guess what? You got to pay for that. Because once you put it out in the universe that I want clicks and views, the universe does not differentiate. It just give you clicks and views. So now, here they come the rest of them. And now you got clicks and views.
My question to that, though, is there was the podcast, and there was a comedian who talked about you. And you waited a while before ever responding to Katt Williams.
Well, see, first of all, I ain't really good at social media, so I didn't even know that was out there. But they can, like, really kiss most of the corners of my ass when you say stuff like that. First of all, man, let me say this. If I had a chance to talk to Katt about anything, I would just ask him what's wrong. Just what's wrong. Let's go to that. Listen to me, man. Just because a person sits on the show and don't hesitate or say or and speaks eloquently, that don't mean it's true. That just don't mean it's true, man. And I probably shouldn't have said anything. That's a regret I have. I really shouldn't have said nothing. Because we not in the same league, dog. We shooting at two different baskets. I shouldn't even have said nothing. And so really, man, I think I would apologize to him if he took offense to what I said. I was joking, but I would apologize to him. And like I said, if I had a chance to sit down with him, I would just say, hey, man, what's wrong? But you got to look at the whole tone of the interview. If the whole tone of the interview is what everybody else ain't, what everybody else ain't got, what everybody else doing, I think that's kind of like hate and jealousy. And hate and jealousy is a form of grief. You're grieving because obviously all them people you talking about have something you either want or are something that you ain't. And you're grieving. And the funeral becomes the podcast. So now let me roast all of these people.
Oh, cut it out, Steve. Cut Steve Harvey up there crying, and you can tell he's still in his feelings about that Katt Williams interview. That shit did some big numbers, man, because he can't let it go with his Mr. Potato Head looking ass. He's trying to garner some sympathy. Man, don't nobody want to hear that, because first of all, if he was just up there roasting people, the man is a comedian. That's his job, shit, to get up on that stage and make the...
And as the spotlight stays on Steve Harvey, the whispers don't stop. They grow louder, deeper, and more detailed. Because the truth has a way of crawling back into the light, no matter how many times you try to bury it under fame, fortune, and a fancy smile. The world keeps watching, but the people who once laughed with him are now laughing at him, or worse, staying silent. Silence says more than words sometimes, especially in Hollywood. And lately, that silence has been deafening. Katt Williams keeps resurfacing, not out of bitterness, but out of principle. Every time he speaks on it, he says the same thing. The problem ain't that Steve made it. The problem is how he made it. Those words sting because they hit the core of what every artist fears, that the people at the top didn't play fair to get there. Katt doesn't need validation. He's got his legacy, his own audience. But when he speaks about Steve, you can hear that frustration, that disappointment, like watching someone you once respected sell out for a check. Then Monique, still standing on her truth, still unbothered by the doors that closed on her. She said in one interview, "When you stand for what's right, you stand alone." That line didn't just apply to Hollywood, it applied to Steve Harvey himself. Because when he sat across from her, when he looked her in the eyes and said she should have played the money game, it wasn't just a disagreement, it was a moment of revelation. It showed us all who he'd become. The same man who once preached about self-respect and faith in God was now teaching compromise in the name of survival. But what happens when survival becomes your only purpose? What happens when you've been in the game so long that you forget who you were before the fame? You start to become the game itself. That's what happened to Steve. He became the system he used to criticize. He became the Hollywood machine, polished, packaged, profitable, but no longer pure. And behind closed doors, people talk. They always do. Insiders say Steve's hunger for control goes beyond the stage, that even in his personal relationships, he plays chess while everyone else is playing checkers, that his marriages, his mentorships, even his friendships, all come with conditions. You're in his circle as long as you serve the purpose, but the moment you stop being useful, you're out, cold, just like that. There's a reason so many comedians, so many voices, all tell the same kind of story about him. Different details, same pattern. That doesn't happen by coincidence. That's the kind of consistency that doesn't lie. When Cedric the Entertainer was asked about those days, he hesitated. You could see it in his face, the loyalty, the nostalgia, but also the disappointment. He said, "We all started together, but sometimes when one of us gets too high up, it's hard to reach back down without looking down." That right there wasn't just a statement. It was a warning, because in the world of comedy, you rise by lifting others, but in the world of Steve Harvey, you rise by standing alone. Then there's the story that broke a lot of fans' hearts. The story about Bernie Mac's passing. People say Steve didn't show up the way a brother should have. There were rumors of tension before Bernie's death. Rumors that Steve had tried to distance himself. Rumors that he didn't want to share the spotlight anymore. And when Bernie was gone, the public love poured in. But behind that love, the guilt lingered. Steve's tribute felt polished, rehearsed, too perfect. Like a man trying to rewrite his part in a story that the streets already knew by heart. Bernie was authentic. He didn't play by Hollywood's rules. He didn't beg for approval. He didn't fake it. And maybe that's why he never became the safe comedian for corporate America. But he was real. And that's something you can't manufacture. That's something money can't buy. Steve had everything. TV shows, radio, fame. But Bernie had the people. He had their respect. And once you lose respect, all the money in the world can't get it back. Years pass. The shows keep rolling. The suits get sharper. The words more polished. The laughter more forced. And yet you can see it now, in the interviews, in the cracks between the smiles, that somewhere deep down, Steve Harvey knows the ghosts are catching up. You can hear it in his voice when he gets defensive, when he tells stories about his success like he's still trying to convince himself he earned it clean. Because here's the thing about truth. It doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't care how big your mansion is, how many books you've sold, or how many people still clap when you walk into a room. Truth waits, quietly, patiently, and when the moment's right, it rises. And now it's rising again, through every interview, every clip, every name that dares to speak what others won't. The comedy world is remembering. The fans are connecting dots. The laughter that once hid the pain now feels like a mask that's slipping. And as the mask falls, all that's left is the man underneath, the real Steve Harvey. Maybe that's the biggest twist in this whole story. That the man who taught millions how to smile through pain might be the one still hiding behind his own. That the king of comedy, the talk show motivator, the man who preached about faith and success, is still wrestling with the one thing he can't control, his legacy. Because when the cameras turn off and the lights fade, all that's left is what people remember. And right now, people aren't remembering the punchlines. They're remembering the betrayals, the callouts, the ones who said, "He did me wrong." And maybe, just maybe, this is the full circle moment that Steve never saw coming. The moment where the jokes don't land the same, the audience doesn't clap as loud, and the mirror finally shows a man who climbed the mountain but lost his reflection on the way up. The world still laughs when he speaks, but now, somewhere between those laughs, you can hear something else. Truth echoing through every pause, every accusation, every silence from those who knew him best. And as the curtain falls, one question lingers, heavy and unshakable. Was the crown worth the cost? You can almost feel the weight of it now, years later when old interviews resurface and old friends start talking again. When Katt Williams goes viral for calling out the truth, or when Monique's words about loyalty still echo through social media. When fans start revisiting the original kings of comedy with fresh eyes, looking for moments that didn't seem strange before. It's like watching history rewrite itself in real time. The laughter is still there, but it feels different now, like there's something underneath it, something heavy, And that's the thing about karma. It never comes when you expect it, but it always comes. Maybe that's what's happening now. Maybe all those years of climbing, all those choices are finally catching up. Because you can silence people for a while, but you can't silence the truth forever. And now, one by one, the truth is walking right up to Steve Harvey's front door. But let's be honest, Steve isn't done. He's still out there, smiling, working, building, preaching, teaching. He's still playing the game, and he's still winning. Maybe that's what makes him so fascinating. He's proof that success doesn't always come from being perfect. Sometimes it comes from being relentless. Sometimes it comes from learning how to make people believe in your story, even if parts of it aren't true. And maybe that's the real lesson here, that fame doesn't change people, it just reveals who they really are. So here we are, years later, watching the comedy world divide itself between those who believe in Steve Harvey and those who don't, between those who think he's a genius and those who think he's a thief, between those who see a legend and those who see a man built on borrowed stories. And maybe both sides are right. Maybe Steve Harvey is both the dreamer and the schemer, the hero and the hustler, the man who made people laugh and the man who left others crying behind the scenes. As the lights fade and the truth continues to come out, one thing's for sure, comedy will never be the same. Because now when we hear that familiar laugh, when we see that perfect smile, we can't help but wonder what it cost to get there. And maybe, just maybe, that's the real punchline.
And now it's rising again, through every interview, every clip, every name that dares to speak what others won't. The comedy world is remembering. The fans are connecting dots. The laughter that once hid the pain now feels like a mask that's slipping. And as the mask falls, all that's left is the man underneath, the real Steve Harvey. Maybe that's the biggest twist in this whole story, that the man who taught millions how to smile through pain might be the one still hiding behind his own. That the king of comedy, the talk show motivator, the man who preached about faith and success is still wrestling with the one thing he can't control, his legacy. Because when the cameras turn off and the lights fade, all that's left is what people remember. And right now, people aren't remembering the punchlines. They're remembering the betrayals, the callouts, the ones who said, "He did me wrong." And maybe, just maybe, this is the full circle moment that Steve never saw coming. The moment where the jokes don't land the same, the audience doesn't clap as loud, and the mirror finally shows a man who climbed the mountain but lost his reflection on the way up. The world still laughs when he speaks, but now, somewhere between those laughs, you can hear something else. Truth, echoing through every pause, every accusation, every silence from those who knew him best. And as the curtain falls, one question lingers, heavy and unshakable. Was the crown worth the cost?